Hey, welcome to Smoker Broker. I'm Robert Mesh, and I am the guy they call the Smoker Broker. Hope everybody's doing well. Appreciate everybody watching. It's funny, throughout the week, I hear so many people talk to me about how they watch the show, how they appreciate it. People I don't even see very often say they got a little bit of something from it. So I want to start off the show by always thanking everybody. I don't think I do that enough by telling everybody how much it's appreciated that the show is watched so often throughout the week. We've talked over the last few shows, the last few weeks. Our viewership is really strong. We have about 400 to 600 people that watch it over archive throughout the week. So that's very meaningful for us that we're getting information out that's actually useful for a lot of people out there. Happy Thursday to you. We are in KVGI Media. We're going across the coast to coast live without limits. People all across the country sometimes watch. It's more Texas based than anything, but always enjoy the folks at with KVGI. They're a great support group for us, great advertising, great marketing, and always encourage everybody who is looking at doing this type of format to really contact the KVGI folks, which I can help you with that if you want to. But they do such a good job with pushing our stuff across to so many people out there. So happy Thursday. Hope everything's going well. I mean, we're still in this monstrosity of day to day things changing, closed open, uh, and I don't know what the right answers are anymore with it, but we do continue to move on like we always do. I think it'll continue to be a struggle for the next year or two on how these things pan out, but all we can do is do the best that we can, try to be careful, try to be respectful of others, and do the best we can. That's all we can do. It's tough, it makes it hard on us. It's not the easiest thing. We tell the agents that they have to have the mask on. Then we're like, oh, you're okay. Now we have to tell them to put the mask back on. It can be frustrating. From a real estate perspective, I'm going to tell you right now, and I told the guys just the other day, we are back on being super careful when we're out and about. They're required to have masks on. Well, that's probably because the state requires it too, but they're required to have the mask on. They're required to be disinfecting the knobs, and it's inconvenient, but it is the right thing to do. And we have become more forceful with that as we're getting out about. So if any of the agents out there who are watching that you go back and forth on, should I be doing this? Should I be doing that? The mask are on and being very careful when you're showing the properties. Of course, if there's anybody inside the home that has been, infected, you need to be super careful from a legal perspective as to how you move forward with that particular sale. So trying times, different atmospheres. We're learning as we go, but we are doing the best that we can. The market continues to be. So I got my buddy over there who runs the company with me. He's over there showing his true colors with his mask on. So he's abiding by the policies inside the office.
Yeah.
So that's Mr. Brent Holberg. He
I heard you could get a computer virus, so I didn't know how that worked.
So you're worried about computer virus, huh?
Right.
That might be worse than the actual virus itself. Who knows? Everybody knows my guy Brent Holberg. He runs the company with me, and he's one of my main co-hosts out there. So he always makes his time to do the show, probably because I make him. But I think he likes to do it a little bit. But I always appreciate him doing the show. I can't do it by myself. I need the input from other people. They point out a lot of things that I forget, and quite honestly, they're involved a lot more than I am sometimes in the day to day. So I always like having Brent on with me. He has such a strong expertise on what we're doing. Plus, he writes a lot of this stuff too. So
I just try to keep track from filing a complaint against you.
Hey, they've been done before. So luckily, no track complaints ever gone through on me. I'm as clean as it comes when it comes to those types of things. Well, it's funny you mentioned that. I always tell everybody I'm always super proud of the fact I've never been sued in 20 years. It's very hard to do. It is, and everybody who knows me, they always hear my same spiel. It's because I truly believe I'm a no gray area type of guy. It's either right or it's wrong. I always tell everybody I can always make more money, but I can never get my ethics back. And that's something that we build the SWR group at Keller Williams on. We build it off of that same philosophy. So it's funny that you mentioned that because I am proud of the fact that that's never happened. And I like to think it's because we're really concentrating on the things that we should be concentrating on. Things such as working with the buyers, working with the buyer and the things that you should and should not be doing, because that's what we're going to talk about today. We are going to talk about how you work with the buyer. Now, we did this show a couple months ago, but we did the first part. We did the beginning piece of it. So now we're going to kind of get into the midsection where we start talking about where we found the house and we're going to put an offer. Now, this is going to kind of coincide with the show that we do when we do contracts and how we prepare contracts, but it's different because now we're doing the prep for it. We're doing the prep for what is it that we need to look at before we do the actual offer. So this show is super informative for especially new agents who are just getting in, who haven't worked contracts yet, wondering how you do that. And it's helpful for anybody probably within the last 5 years to make sure they're still doing it right. Even the veterans, sometimes it doesn't hurt to watch the show to see if you're still doing things the way that we think that they should be done. Not that our way is right compared to our veteran brokerages and peers out there, but it is always nice to compare. I mean, I listen to other brokers too, what they're doing. I like to hear what they're doing to make sure I'm like, that's probably better than we're doing. So really something for everyone out there. If you are currently working with buyers, so any of the agents out there that you're currently working with buyers, if you hear something on the show today that you think helps your buyer, you should tell them to watch the episode. That's where this show really is valuable as well, where you can take it to your clients and you can tell them, hey, look, you should watch so you can better understand. I know I've told you this, but maybe if you heard it from somebody else, you can see what it is that we're doing and have a better understanding so that this transaction runs smoother. So this should be very helpful for everyone out there. All right, let's go ahead and we'll jump right into it. We can talk a lot about other stuff at the current events, but I really try to minimize COVID as much as I can. I know it's out there and I know we need to talk about it, and we'll continue to talk about it in the opening of the show for probably quite some time. But I want to focus in on real estate because we have to have the other side of what it is that we do. And even though COVID has kind of torn down a lot of things, we still move forward in this industry. I will also say that we're one of the industries, fortunately, that has not really been affected as much by COVID. And that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. We still keep our eyes on the unemployment, and that definitely could have an effect on what we see in the next 5 or 6 months. But as of right now, we're actually running record months. The showings are up, the house selling's up, and I will take credit for this. I said on this very show, you can go watch the archives in March. I said it's very possible that there is a euphoric end to COVID. Now, I'm not celebrating the fact that 130,000 people have died and more are dying. I am well aware of the horribleness of it. But COVID has also forced a lot of not people, not only in this country, but everywhere, to look at if we can get past this, we can probably get past just about anything. And I'm going to tell you how I know I'm right here. Notice, and this was in the Wall Street Journal just the other day, notice how they said car sales and house sales are up. Those are two of the largest ticket items that someone purchased. And they point blank said in that article that there were a lot of people that just said, screw it. I'm going to buy it because I want to be happy. I don't want to be surrounded by all this worry. So I'm going to do it. I've said that 3 or 4 months ago, and I'm starting to think I was right, because I do think that people are starting to get to where they're like, I do want to be happy. And it's obvious that my happiness can be curtailed at any moment, and I'm not going to live like that. So I'm going to do what I need to do now to make myself happy. And I think we're starting to see just a little bit of that. And I think you're going to start seeing that. Wait till we have a vaccine. I think once we have a vaccine, you're going to see a lot of people reevaluate their lives as to where they're at and what they're doing. I'll personally tell you, I was talking to my wife, Dina, the other day, and it's kind of, I don't know if it's kind of negative how I said this, but I said it in a positive way. I told her, I go, look, I'm knocking on 50's door. And honestly, we have probably 15 to 20 years where we can still really do things actively and have a good time. Not that if you're over 70, you don't still actively and can't have a good, that's still true too. But I think we all agree as we start getting to 70 and 80, it kind of slows down just a little bit. And I told her I didn't want the next 20 years I wanted to make sure that we enjoyed them, and I think there's a lot of other people out there like that are starting to look at, are those the things that we should be doing in light of what's happened over there. So, to each their own, but again, COVID will continue to be a beginning part of the conversation as we go through. So we're working with buyers. We talked the last time, we talked about the preferences. We talked a little bit about the finance. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the offer prep. not so much the offer exact, but the prep for it because it's different. So, Brent, let's talk about some of the things we do as we prepare to get into the offer. Think about some of the things we're going to do first before we say we're going to put this offer. What are the things we're going to look at, and what are we going to ask when we do this?
Well, first thing is we take a look at the condition of the house that we're in, right? Because we're eventually going to comp it, which is where he's ultimately going. And I'm the master of just jumping to his point before he's ready to get there.
You are.
We walk through the house and we kind of look and we say, all right, this isn't working, or, we're going to have to ultimately make this repair. This isn't good. So we're going to take that into consideration before we comp it. Because there are things that they're like, okay, look, this carpet's trash, so we're going to have to do this, or, we can tell the water heater's not working or something like that. So we always take into possible repairs into consideration.
Right.
And
then look, so repairs are going to be, I was talking about the negotiation itself being the hardest part. I personally believe the repairs are the most difficult part of the transaction. We always talk about takeaways from the show. That's a big takeaway. A lot of people make the mistake. They think the offer process is the most difficult. That's not the most difficult. The repairs are more difficult because the buyer thinks they're entitled to have everything fixed. Mm-hmm. And the seller's like, forget it. I've lived here for all this time. Why am I going to fix it for you when I didn't fix it for me? So that is a problem. And we do start prepping. So I'll go a little bit into more detail what Brent's talking about, especially when we're talking about preparation to this offer. When you're a new agent, well, I don't know why I said new, whenever you're an agent, it's always a good idea to tell that buyer before we get into this contract, look, we're going to do an inspection. That inspection is going to make this house look like it's fallen into the ground, but we are not going to ask for everything on that inspection. Now, we talk about this on our inspection show, which, by the way, the sponsor of this show is one of our premier inspectors, Martin Cooley, which we'll have that information put down here in just a little bit. Or now, it doesn't matter. But and we'll talk a little bit more about Martin. They're saying we'll talk a little bit more about Martin later. But we prep our buyers for someone like Martin is going to make the house look like it's falling down, which he's supposed to. But you have to have good bedside mannerisms, which Martin does all the time. And you have to break it to him like, look, the state tells us that we have to do this, but this is what I would do if it were me. So we need to tell our buyer that information before we get into this, because we know that's going to come up. And we don't want to basically have that buyer negotiate hard and then come in 10 days later and ask for another $5,000 to $10,000 off. So we're going to go ahead and set the stage for them. And, we talk about expectations on the show all the time. It means it's very important and it's meaningful to tell the buyer, you can't do that, because if you don't tell them that, then they get to the inspection and they expect that the whole thing's going to be taken care of. And it's not. So that's one thing that we prep for. Brent, talk a little bit about the seller's disclosure. Tell them why we get the seller's disclosure, what's on it, what is it that we're paying attention to prior, and talk about the agents that don't get the seller's disclosure prior to, which I still can't believe that's an option on that contract.
I've never looked at a seller's disclosure before.
Have you needed to explain? People tell you about it?
No, the seller's disclosure is something that we're taught to request. Usually they're online on the MLS sheet. If not, we request that they send them prior to getting an offer, just because there can be a lot of stuff in that report that can influence your buyer, what they're going to do.
I want to stop you on that. I want to interrupt you because I want you to continue with that. But this is another takeaway that I really enjoy about the seller's disclosure. And this isn't so much offer preparation as this is just it's an interesting conversation piece. So Brent mentioned that most realtors put the seller's disclosure on the MLS, okay? Because in the last few years, we've had the technology that we can actually post it so the agents can see it. I'm not the biggest fan of posting. If I'm the listing agent, I'm not the biggest fan of posting my seller's disclosure. And there's a lot of people who watch this show that are going to be irritated that I said that. I've even had some say, that's illegal what you're doing. One, it ain't illegal. And believe me, I know. Two, I've had some people go, well, you're just lazy to not put that out. I go, yeah, that's exactly why I didn't do it. So you could sit there and call me lazy. It's not a laziness thing. In fact, it's quite intelligent if you think about it. The reason why a lot of times I encourage my agents, and not all of them do. In fact, I think Brent posted just because he doesn't want to be bothered with it. That's okay. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. I'm going to tell you why I don't do it. I like the fact that an agent, a buyer agent, asked me that they need to see the seller's disclosure. Because y'all, I'm going to tell you right now, when a buyer agent asks to see the seller's disclosure, that's about an 80% chance that they are seriously considering putting an offer on that home. That is very valuable information to my seller. If I don't put it out there, I never know when somebody pulls it. So I really don't know how strong the interest is. It's amazing how many people think I'm the one who's in the minority by saying that thing shouldn't be posted. I'm not hiding it from anybody. I give the thing immediately when they ask for it. Make no mistake, I'm not hiding the seller's disclosure. I am giving it to them. I just want them to ask for it because I think the information is extremely valuable. So I love when he said that. I wanted to point that out. That's a good takeaway. That's a very good tip for those of you who never looked at it like that. That's a very good tip to help your seller saying, hey, look, they asked for the seller's disclosure and they don't do that just for the hell of it. That means they're thinking about buying this house. All right, keep going with the seller's disclosure, Brent.
No, I mean, there's things in there that can influence how if your buyer is willing to make an offer, have they had foundation work, and has there been foundation issues? Has it been repaired? Has there been any damage to the home? Has there been a fire? Has there been some sort of not necessarily a death, but a murder on site? I mean, there's all kinds of things that would keep somebody from making an offer to begin with.
Talk about foundation. How does that change someone's opinion when they see foundation?
Well, foundation is the number one thing that freaks people out about buying a home. Foundation and roof are the number 1 and 2 things that keep people from making an offer on a house.
Especially in Texas, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, but they just think when they hear foundation, it freaks them out, and they're ready to. A lot of people they're just ready to walk.
So I'll give you a tip on that too for everybody. This is another takeaway. A lot of takeaways from this particular show. And I used to be just as guilty of this. I used to be like, well, if there's foundation, I don't want to mess with the house because I don't want to mess with foundation issues. Over the years, I've learned that in some areas, especially in Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin, San Antonio, there are some areas of those cities that I'd be like, I'm actually comforted by the fact that they've had the foundation work done because a professional's gone in there and now we have warranties in place. So I used to be where I'm like, oh, I don't want anything to do with that. Now I'm like, that's not the worst of things. So there is a problem with people making the assumption that foundation completely eliminates a house. I'm of the opinion you shouldn't eliminate a house just because it has foundation work done on it.
Right.
Texas is a very hard soil clay state. It's very hard. There's a lot of limestone, hard rock. It's like that across the entire central part of the state. So it's not like we're going to get away from this. Now, I will say one of the interesting things about Texas, I don't know how we ever became the primary brick built home slab foundation in this country. Pier and beam is actually a lot better.
Yeah.
Because we can adjust it. I don't know how we ever got to where let's pour a damn slab because it cracks and it's hard, but that is what we eventually did. But it is interesting because a pier and beam is so much easier to adjust. I'm not suggesting that the pier and beam is better. I'm just saying that it's interesting that we moved to a slab at some point because they are difficult to have here in Texas. So I wouldn't necessarily scratch off a house because it has foundation issues. But once again, in the offer process, that should be on there. This is a current event type of show. We actually had it 20 minutes before this show where we had an issue this morning where the seller's like, I forgot to say I had piers in. We're like, oh my God, why? But it wasn't forgot. They actually put it in the check in the disclosure, but it was really small. And we don't think that the other agent saw it, which they didn't. So we had to point out to them, hey, before we sign this, make sure y'all looked at the fact that there was piers put in here. So this is live. These are things that happen like as of right now. So, Brent, what else? You mentioned some other things. What else on the seller's disclosure?
Probably the biggest thing, though, that's the most relevant would be roof. You look and see how old the roof is, right? Because in North Texas, if your roof's more than what? Would you say 5 years old, you're going to need a new one?
Well, in Texas, yeah, it's hard to have not had some type of storm.
Right. So you can look and see, is that roof original? Are there, is there anything that's not permitted? I mean, there's all kinds of issues that there could be. So that's going to influence whether you make an offer on a house and how much your offer should be.
So that's a good takeaway. when you do look at the seller's disclosure, when you're putting an offer in, if that roof is older 5 years, you should absolutely be asking the question to the other agent, hey, have there been any storms in that area? I have a hard time believing that within 5 years, and most of the Central Plain state of Texas, San Antonio, Austin, all the way up the I-35 corridor into Dallas, which we practice in all these areas, it's not uncommon for us to have severe storms. So I'm always asking the question, and if it's 10, I'm damn well asking the question.
Well, and to be fair,
Texas to not have a hailstorm, y'all, that's pretty rare. Those of you listen across the country or listen across the country, that's a true story too. It's odd. It's odd to buy a home in Texas where within 10 years it hasn't had some type of damage to it. Wind, hail, we have it all. So when someone tells me they haven't put a roof on, for 10 years, my eyebrows raised just a little bit. So yes,
and then
we're looking at that.
I usually have a roofer come out anyways. A lot of roofing companies will do free inspections anyways. So we have them usually come out during the inspection anyway. So
our sponsor would tell you, he expertises in general property inspection, but even he would acknowledge he's not a roof expert. He's not a plumbing expert. He's not an electrician. It doesn't hurt sometimes to bring those guys out too and go, hey, I want to make sure this part is right. Now, if you're listening to the spirit of this conversation, the reason why this is important, it might affect the offer that we put in if we see these things. Like, for instance, if I see a 10-year roof, I'm going to immediately jump to the conclusion, hey, don't even get to where if we do repairs that you say, well, we're fixing the roof for you. I mean, like, no, the roof should have been fixed well prior to this. That's just a formality. So a lot of times I like to see it so I can brace for myself to protect my buyer, that in inspection, the seller goes, well, I just fixed the roof for you. I'd be like, no, you didn't. That was something you should have done already. It was 10 years old. Don't sit there and act like you're doing me any favors. You're doing what you should have done 5 or 6 years ago. So it does make a difference on how we put an offer. And the biggest issue about putting an offer in place, and this is where I was hinting at why the state allows the offer to be drafted with an option that says you don't have to have looked at the seller's disclosure, is just ridiculous. Because if you put an offer in and it's accepted, you automatically put in option money, $100, $250. If you get the seller's disclosure 2 days later and it has foundation issues and your buyer didn't want the foundation issues, you just cost them $100 to $250 because you didn't look at what they should have known before they put that offer in place.
Right. And this is though why it's important to have a veteran agent, or at least an agent that's well trained, because a good agent can pretty much tell you what the issues are going to be on the initial walkthrough, right? They can look up and see if there's shingles missing, if there's discoloration, if there's possible foundation problems. We have a good idea going into it. If there's going to be issues, we can look at the HVAC. I mean, is it all rusted, and all that stuff.
Yeah, and that's why we pride ourselves in the SWR group. We go a step above and beyond. We're making sure our agents understand what it is they're doing. We don't just throw them out there and say, good luck. We're telling them, we believe that this is what you're going to see. These little things that we talk about on this show, you might not think it's a big deal. It's a huge deal if you put them all together. If you're really paying attention, these minor things that we say, these are the things that cause problems over the years. These are the things that you're not taught in some class or that happen every day. Y'all, we're doing my playbook for the last 20 years. And my playbook contains not only all the BS that I've gone through, but all the other agents I've ever met who are friends and peers of mine, all their BS too. Yeah. So it's all in there. We're trying to correct these little things. Look, any new agent out there, tell me I'm wrong, that you go through some class and the class teaches you about this is how you do the offer. Do you think they talk to you about this stuff? No. There's not enough time in the day. That's our responsibility. We're the ones that are supposed to point out to you, look, this is what's going to happen if you're not paying attention to that. And that is why we say that we're better than a lot of people out there. And it's not an arrogant statement. It's a confident statement. We go through to make sure that you're looking at the little things to make sure you're doing it right. These things here, these are very powerful for you when you're out there dealing with the buyer. We are prepping you to not make a mistake when you're drafting the offer. The offer is the least part of this problem. It's what's inside the offer and why we offered like we did that we're more concerned about. So that's what we're telling you here. We're pointing out to you, you should have looked at that. You should have seen that before you put that offer. That's my guys will tell you that I'm usually fairly pleasant when it comes to real estate. I am. Look, he's such a liar. But like this type of stuff, it drives me crazy. Because my first comment to them is, why the hell did you put that offer in place if you didn't see that seller's disclosure? Now I'm having to deal with this phone call. That buyer's chewing my ass out because you just cost him $200 on something that even a fourth grader would have known to do.
Well, that happens under multiple offer situations a lot, though. If that is not online and it's time is of the essence.
And look, and I'll disclaim there. Sometimes we got to do what we got to do. Sometimes that is more important. I'm talking about when you just had all the time in the world and you did that. That's just dumb.
Yep.
What Brent's talking about, that is different. If we're in a market, I should do this. When we're in a marketing, when we're in a multiple offer, we got to get moving. And we know the risk that we're taking when we do that. That's a cost of doing business. I'm talking about the person that's just sitting there and goes, oh, what the hell? I'll just wait to get it. Why? Why would you just wait to get it? It's already there. It's already done. So
right. And if that agent is hesitant to give it to you, that should be a huge red flag.
Yeah.
You know, or we've seen it before. I'm sure you have in your career. Oh, well, they haven't finished filling it out yet. What? I mean, that happens a lot. You know,
yeah. I'm like, what are you waiting for? You know?
Yeah. Feel like, well, we'll wait for our offer then. Yeah. Right? Yeah.
That's a good takeaway too. Seller's disclosure, it should be done the day of the listing. You shouldn't wait. And now it's mostly automated. Well, at least the Keller Williams world, it's automated because we go through our seller shield. But that should be done that day. Those of you who wait 2 or 3 days, that can be annoying too.
Yep.
That can be annoying when you're waiting, you know, to do a seller's disclosure. They should have done that first thing because it's very possible that we have an offer the next day.
Yep.
Plus, we need to have seen that damn thing. We need to know what's coming up. We need to know what the problem is. You know, Brent's right. He is, you know, that's why his name, it says he's not an idiot. He's not an idiot. You know, he does understand. He put that on there because I called him one a little while ago, but he wasn't an idiot, but he put that on there anyway. So let's talk a little bit. We can talk about seller's disclosure. Make no mistake that we can continue to go through the seller's disclosure, prepping us for offer, but we use that for our seller's disclosure show. Let's talk a little bit about other things that we look at. Let's discuss, what about the MLS? What can the MLS tell us about a property before we put an offer on? What are some things that we could look at that maybe we should have seen?
Well, I mean, aside from the obvious, the size and whatnot, I mean, we're going to be looking under, you know, the description, but also private remarks on what they're letting us know has happened. I mean, we see it a lot where they say, please call listing agent for some information. And
so that's good. That wasn't one I was going to mention, but that's one that should be on here. That's good. Something in private remarks that suggests that there's an issue. Maybe it's suggesting that there's a divorce that was disclosed, that was allowed to be disclosed, but there are special instructions in place. Maybe it says that there's a court-mandated receivership where we're going to have to go through the courts. There are things that might dictate, hey.
There was a murder. I've gotten that before.
That's right. Right.
I'm out.
the type of property. Is it a foreclosure?
Yep.
That can give us a little bit of
days on
market. A bit different today, but foreclosures used to sell a bit under the market value. We do tend to be a little bit more aggressive on a foreclosure offer than we would a family that's living in the home. That's not so much true today, but it normally historically is the truth. So the MLS can tell us that. The MLS can tell us, should we be more aggressive? Brent, what about the history on the MLS? What might that tell us about that house?
It tells me a lot, Robert, and it also tells me that I forget to click on that a lot. So, and rated me for it.
His name's right.
So, yeah, if you look at the history, you can see the last few times, I mean, that it's been in the MLS. I don't know how far back it goes, Robert. I think it stops at like 2000 or something like that.
Yeah, but it's long enough that our concern, the reason why I'm really looking at the MLS history, I want to know if that house has been sold in the last year or two.
Yep.
Most people don't turn around and sell a house that quick unless it's a relo or there's something they didn't like. My eyebrow raises just a little bit when someone's within 2 years. They'll come up with a lot of excuses, but I want to make sure that it's legit.
Well, better than that is they've sold within a year and they're trying to earn 50,000 on top.
That's where I'm going with this too. I don't like it when the market has stayed steady as it has for the last 3 years. We've been in a high market for the last 3 years. It has not altered that much over the last 3 years. I don't like it when I'm purchasing a house. I pull up the history and I see that those people purchased the house for $350 a year and a half ago, and now they're asking $500 and they haven't done anything to it. I'm like, what the hell? Like, you can't possibly think we're about ready to write you a check for $150K.
Yep.
Just because you think there's been some type of appreciation in that house.
Well, that's a great lesson for other agents too, because it's an example of me a couple months ago. There was a really large house that I was needing help comping because it's, there's nothing like it in the area. And so Robert got involved and, we're looking citywide. And then he goes, did you look at the history? I was like, oh no, I didn't. And I looked, they just sold it or they just bought it like a year and a half ago and they're trying to earn 150,000, like you said, and they didn't do anything to it.
So look, I'm going to take that as an opportunity for the newer agents that watch. I love Brent and a lot of my other top tier agents because they're very honest and forthcoming. That's something Brent should know to do, but he's overwhelmed.
Have a drink.
He is going to forget. He is going to forget at times. And he is not the type that says, oh, I do that all the time. He knows that he too forgets it. So that's a good takeaway. Even from someone who's a veteran agent, you're going to forget these things from time to time. We're just telling you the importance of it. And hopefully something clicks that you're like, I got to make sure that I do that. Now, if I wanted to bust his chops, I'd be like, well, that's because you don't follow the checklist anymore.
What checklist?
Yeah, the one that's not posted on our forum.
Yeah.
I had to tell him to just post a little.
Out of sight, out of mind.
But we tell our guys that. We tell them you should have looked at this because that can tell you something. I'd be kind of scared if, and God knows this happens all the time, a buyer agent tells a buyer to buy the house, they give them the offer and everything, and then the neighbor next door goes, well, they paid this much for it last year. Well, then that buyer comes straight back. How the hell do you not know that? It's just as much our responsibility to check that out. And you do not want someone coming back saying, you should have told me that. That's the worst. That's like the kiss of death in this industry, to be told, oh, you should have known that when you really should have known that. So that's a great takeaway. And again, we're high on our show, not because it's us. We're high on the show because we know the information we give you is extremely valid. I'm telling you right now, that is not something that's taught in any textbook to check the history of the MLS prior to drafting an offer. That's something you learn over time and experience. You also learn because you've been burned so many times by it. I always tell everybody, I don't have any skin left on my back because I gave it all up. I gave it up for my agents so that they don't have to go through the BS that I did. I tell everybody, I've aged fairly well. Look, my hair's still my beard gets a little bit gray, but I got some, well, Brent disagrees. But from a stress perspective, I'm telling you, I had shingles when I was like 32. You're not supposed to get shingles until you're older. But the stress that we have, but the stress that's built, these things that we're talking about, that caused that type of stuff because nobody helped me with it. Nobody told me that this was a problem. And I was hit every which way. Y'all, I'm a total, if you pull up Murphy's Law in the dictionary, it'll have a picture of me sitting there doing this because that everything that could ever go wrong has hit me every which way. But I will also tell everybody that is why I'm extremely experienced in what I do because I have seen it before. And I took it as a very strong compliment the other day. Had some really good friends of mine. They were asking me some basic questions about housing. They're actually going to sell their house on their own, which that's fine. They were very upfront. They wanted to ask me a few questions. I certainly happily answered for them. But I love the fact that they told me, they go, well, look, we watch your show all the time. And their point blank words were, they go, we know you know your shit. I'm not talking about that because that's true on my part. I'm talking about it because I've been burned just like the flames have below me so many times that I have seen it and I don't want it to happen to somebody else. That's what we're doing on this show. These little pieces that we're giving you, every one of these was at some point a problem for me. So that's why we're going through and telling you should have looked at that type of stuff.
How do you
go ahead, Brent?
How do you handle it when I'm just curious to see what your opinion is. We've got when you tell a buyer, hey, I think this house is actually priced pretty fairly.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's offer 20K under. They always assume that they have to offer way under.
Yeah.
And there's that balance, right, between insulting the seller or getting your client the best value. But you also can be fair to them too.
Yeah. So we're talking buyer offer prep, buyer working with buyer during due to offer prep, and that's a big one. Okay. There are buyers that have been taught from day one the philosophy of, well, the worst they can do is say no.
Yep.
That's not true. The worst they can do is tell you to go bleep yourself and never come back, which has happened many times to me because of a stunt like that from a buyer. It can get worse. There is worse than no. They can actually ban you from coming back because you annoyed them so bad. This BS about shooting for the moon, that doesn't work in this industry. And I'm going to tell you right now, it damn well doesn't work for the last 3 years. I am so sick of repeating myself to someone, telling them that we have not taken an offer under 20,000 on any property that I'm aware of in the last 3 or 4 years. Most of the offers right now are either full price or they're within 5K.
Yep.
So for anybody to think that doing 20 or 30K less, you're wasting everybody's time.
Yep. It also depends how it's presented. It depends how it's presented. Like I've seen people coming in saying, hey, we're not trying to be insulting. They really like the house. That's
a great point.
That the only way they could get into it is at this. This is the top of their budget. If you say no, we understand, but we're just presenting it to you to have.
So I use a live example too. And this is why I still practice just a bit. I'm not a main producer anymore because the firm takes up my time, but I still keep my feet wet. So I'm dealing with a veteran agent, a good friend of mine. This is a live deal. And this is hypocritical to what I just said, but what Brent just said is exactly why I had to do it. We came in 20K below on a property. Now I just sat there and told you this is a waste of time and this is a ridiculous, but there is an asterisk to that. And the asterisk to it is if the listing agent is ridiculously high on their comp, meaning I can't find anything that addresses it. So Brent talked about it's the presentation. So in that particular example, and this is an agent, me and her have been doing business for a long time together. She's well respected too. I told her, look, I cannot find anything close to what you have. We like this house and I'll pay you top dollar for it, but I can't pay you it if I know it's not going to appraise. I need 3. I can't find 1.
Yep.
So I politely asked her, look, we want to work with you. But you got to be able to show me something that says this will justify.
The same thing.
She was polite, but she did the other route. Her route was, well, best of luck to your buyers. We hope they do well. She's telling me, I hear you.
I don't have them.
But that ain't going to happen.
That also says the seller's high. It's not her.
And you know what? We ended up putting an offer that was closer to it. Probably going to be executed this afternoon. I am still very fearful it won't appraise. I've made my buyer aware of it. And I've told the listing agent, this is not going to end up the way everybody thinks, but it's the presentation of it. It's how we present it more than anything. All right. We already talked a little bit about our show sponsor, but I'm going to do it one more time officially. Martin Cooley with BPG Inspections. We have a lot of inspectors that we work with, and we always give our clients multiple inspectors to choose from because that is what we are supposed to do. We don't want to say you have to use this particular person, but I'd be lying if we didn't favor Martin a lot more than a lot of the other inspectors. He's done hundreds for us over the years. We've never had one issue nor any type of complaint from any of our clients or customers that have ever used him. I mentioned that his bedside manner is great. What I mean by that is those reports look like the house has just gone to hell, but he'll actually separate the ones that, hey, look, you really need to do this versus this one I'm not so sure on. It makes it easier for someone like me, who's a broker who reviews every document. I don't let any document leave unless I've seen it. And when I get those, and, I get anywhere from 7 to 8 of those a day sometimes, I'll go through. It makes it easy for me to see the summarized pieces. So not only if you're a practicing agent or a supervising agent, this guy down below does a really good job for us. So we always appreciate his sponsorship, his friendship. Very good in real estate inspector. His information is below. All right. The other thing on the MLS, We are also looking at the sales data. We were kind of just talking about this. We're looking at, I didn't realize it, but I actually went to the next step, not even realizing we were going to the next step. We are going to look at the comps to make sure they're in line. And we're going to use the MLS to make sure that this agent has been exactly where they should be, that we need to know. Yeah, Cami, thank you too. You know, anybody who's on the show that sponsors the show or that wants to be a part of sponsor the show, we have anywhere from 400 to 600 people that watch this show, all real estate agent based. What Cami mentioned in that comment over there, that is from people being sponsors on this show. Sponsorship works on this show. So if you're ever interested, you should talk to us about it. It's extremely reasonable to sponsor the show. It's not like we take a ton of money from somebody, but it is worth it. You know, even for someone like Martin, all he has to do is pull a couple deals to pay for what he does in here. So I love Cami mentioning that because, you know, we do run what's considered to be one of the largest groups in the Keller Williams environment. And a lot of our agents utilize that. So this is a good business relationship amongst the rest. And I hope people appreciate the fact that I don't just say you have to use Martin. I say there's many choices out there. We give them many choices. I have very good friends that do this as well. You know, Deb Stadler is a very good inspector friend of mine. We throw those names out there, but obviously we favor one versus the other. So I appreciate Cami saying that because I like our sponsors to feel like they're getting their money's worth when they're on the show. Okay, we already talked about how you prepare clients for inspections, appraisals. Another offer prep that we've talked about recently, and it's simple. It's not as difficult as the other conversations, but it's the monetary. So Brent, talk about what we are preparing our clients from a money perspective as soon as we get this contract.
Right. And that's
what's going to happen.
Well, that's something too that I always have it in the back of my mind that I have to remind myself to do this because it hasn't happened, but it's a fear they're going to say, oh, I don't have any cash yet. So, you know, let's just say $300,000 is their offer price or their offer. You know, we usually put down 1% for earnest money. So they're going to have to write a check for $3,000. They're going to have to write a check for option money, which is between $100 and $250. They're going to have to pay that right up front. They're going to have to pay for an appraisal through the bank. And that's going to be what, $400 or $500?
Yep.
I'm trying to think. Sometimes they make them pay for HOA transfer, some stuff.
Yep, that's good. So good catch there. Not often, but they do.
Every now and then.
The survey might come up, you know.
Okay. Yep.
Here's a good takeaway from the show. Again, another valuable piece of this that is not taught in books. We teach our guys to make sure that we tell them that the HOA docs shouldn't be requested inside of 21 days. Now, the reason why we do that is if you put that you want the HOA docs within 10 days and the seller agrees to that and you're representing the seller, the title company is going to charge your seller a rush fee because they can't get those docs that quick.
A couple $100.
More than that, might be $300 or $400. And that is not something you want. Now this is a good part of this show because that's when it gets your hand slapped a lot. You're not paying attention. You agree to 10 days. If you were taught properly, you would have known to do 21 days because you know it takes the title company that amount of time to get that stuff out there. But if you're being lazy and you just agree to whatever the buyer put on there, now you have to get those docs to the buyer within 10 days. And the only person that can do that is the title company, and they're going to hit you for $400. You just cost your seller, or maybe even yourself, $400 because you didn't tell them something they should have known. Listing agent is always the manager of that process. They should know that that's coming. So yes, you want to make sure you're looking at those types of things, preparing them for the money. We'll tell you another issue that comes up when it comes to monetary. On the earnest money, you need to tell that client, well, the option too, but the earnest money more so because it's more money. That check is going to be cashed probably within 2 or 3 days. It's still your money, provided you follow the contract. But one of the biggest mistakes I made, I want to say it was my second or third deal. The first deal I did was a new construction. Well, inconvenient for me, some new construction builders don't cash the earnest money check. They're one of the only exceptions to this rule, right?
Yep.
So my assumption became the obvious. Well, then they don't cash the earnest check. Second client I had, I told you about the Murphy's Law. Second client I ever had specifically asked me, and I love this story because this has not happened ever since. This is my second deal. I've done thousands of them. The second one, that this happened. You could only have this type of scenario if it's me. Second one, the buyer specifically asked, hey, are they going to cash this earnest money check? And my experienced answer of doing so many deals at the time was, oh, no, they don't do that.
Oh, God.
Because I knew the world. We just didn't do it before. So, of course, they cash it. Buyer bounces about 20 checks. I want to say there's about $450 in NSF fees. They call back and they give me the WTF, which we didn't use that much back then as we do now. They give me the WTF. They're like, I thought you said they wouldn't cash it. I go, I don't know why they did. Call the other agent. They go, obviously you haven't been doing this long enough, which is a horrible thing to be told. They go, we always cash the damn thing. I go, well, they didn't do it with the new builder. They're like, that's because some new builders don't do it. That ended up being $450 that I didn't get back that day because that was my fault. I didn't know that. So these are things that we have to prep ourselves for. We have to prep our buyer.
From on that real quick. Just let me jump in on that real quick. It's as an agent, new or veteran, there's going to be plenty of times you don't know something. And when your client asks you, like how Robert just said, they asked him, are they going to cash it? Oh, no, they're not going to. If you're not 100% sure, let me check. Just say, let me check. And I'll, even if you don't know, call title, ask them.
Well, I always do better with that. This is good business response too. Anytime. This isn't just real estate. A lot of people watch just for general business because we talk about entrepreneurship on the show too. Anytime somebody ever asks you a question that you don't know, don't you ever damn well fake it. You immediately respond, I'll find out in a few minutes for you. Even if you think it's stupid that you didn't know, you always respond, I'll find out in a few minutes for you. You try to ease your way through that, you're going to get your ass eaten up. A real bad person to do that with is a environmentalist, where they're big on the green movement and they ask you about green specific. A lot of the real estate agents aren't very experienced in green terminology, but some of them get embarrassed by it and they fake their way through. You want a good ass chewing? Fake your way through a green conversation with an environmentalist. You'll find out super quick how much you'll lose a deal because you tried to fake an answer you didn't know. You always say, I don't know, but I'll get back with you on
the correct answer to that. What is this, California?
What's that?
The correct answer is, what is this, California? We don't do green.
That's true. Hey, and that's not a badge to our environmentalists and our green people. This is a fact. They'll tell you, they'll be the first ones. You're damn right. I'll know if that person knew or not. So that's a great tip to walk away.
And it is scary though, because like you said, a lot of times you do want to fake it because you want to look knowledgeable. You want to look like you've got everything in hand. And a big fear of agents is to be new and not know. But that's the worst.
I saw Jesse posted that he was just in the office. Jesse, I just realized, and I will blame COVID on this because it's a fact. Jesse had talked about he wanted to be on the show a while back. And I said, no problem. I feel so bad that you were just here. This would have been a perfect opportunity for you to be on the show with us. I'll try to keep that in mind. We are at the office today. I'll try to do a few more shows in the office where some of y'all can come in and get a little experience on the radio show and interact so you can throw your clients. So I'm sorry about that, Jesse. I just realized when you said that, I told you I was going to let you do that. While I'm thinking about it, I've also told Andre and Austin I was going to do that too, and I haven't done that. So I need to do a better job of remembering some of the things that we're talking about in there.
Maybe we should go down to Austin, make a trip to Franklin's too.
Well, I've already, that's the hard. I always tell all of our crews that there's no difference whether you're in Austin or San Antonio. There really isn't. But one thing I do feel bad about recently is my guys are not seeing near as much of me as they do in Austin and San Antonio because of COVID. I really, the offices are, our offices in Austin, just so anybody else is watching, they're a lot more strict right now because they are like, you cannot even come in because they got a big problem down in Austin with the COVID containment. So it is very frustrating. We've launched San Antonio. We have not been able to step foot in San Antonio. And I'll be damned, we still have agents down there. That's very hard. So that's the only thing that I'll really get again, outside the horrific deaths of COVID, that has been something that's been terrible is that we have not been down in Austin. I mean, like even Emily's out there right now. Emily's never physically met me. That's ridiculous. She should have seen me 20 or 30 times by now. She talks to me enough to where it doesn't matter. and sees me enough, but it's still, that's not the same, and that's something that's been difficult. COVID has really pushed us back, but I am happy with all the technology because I do always end with the fact that it's no different than whether I'm here. This is the same thing you're getting with me if I'm in front. And if there is a silver lining in COVID, the world has finally caught up that we do not have to be in person to run these businesses. Never have and never will probably. We can do it like this. It's not my most preferred, but there's no reason why we can't do anything. So even for my Austin, San Antonio cruise, there's no disconnect. You're getting the same thing you get. Hell, even here. Hell, Jesse's probably the first one to walk by my office in the longest time. The Dallas agents, they're not here all the time. So it's interesting how, you mentioned that because that has been the hardest part of COVID. All right, look, I want to thank everybody for watching again. Archive watches are encouraged. Share the show out. Those of you who like to recruit, especially inside of our crew, you should shoot the show out and say, hey, look, this is the type of level of experience we get. This is what we get with day to day. Feel free to watch the show. You can watch pretty much 45 minutes of the show and get to know everything about me that you're ever going to get to know. Brent, too, for that matter, and any of our senior co-hosts that come on the show. What you see is what you get. And it's not just for Keller Williams. This is for brokerages in general. This is the type of support you're owed. This is the type of support we are giving. So thank you for everybody who watches. Thank you for the continued growth in the show. I hope everybody's doing well, staying cool out there. Continue to. Thank you, Laura. I love you out there watching, and I can't wait for you to eventually come on. It's great how many of our newer agents watch the show as well. So thank y'all. Thank you, Sally, for everybody that's always out there. But have a great rest of the week. We will see you guys soon. We'll talk to y'all next week for sure. Have a good one.